The Gujarat government's decision to make voting compulsory in local body elections has raised key questions about whether this is a practical step for a country like India, but also whether it breaches the fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Some 38 countries either have or have had compulsory voting. They include Australia, Belgium and Switzerland. But many leading democracies do not have this measure. That list includes the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada and Germany. And some had compulsory voting but have since given it up. This list includes Austria, Italy, Netherlands and Spain. So tonight we ask, what is the view about making compulsory voting in India compulsory? Forgive me, I read that wrong. My guests are a former member of the Gujarat government, Jay Narayan Vyas, Congress spokesperson Randeep Singh Surjewala, former Chief Election Commissioner T.S. Krishnamurthy and leading Supreme Court lawyer C. Aryamasundaram. Mr. Vyas, the Gujarat government bill making voting compulsory in local elections has got the governor's assent, and once rules are framed, voting will be compulsory for everyone in Gujarat. Why do you believe voting should be compulsory?
Well, Karan, the very basic definition of democracy, it says that democracy is a government by the people, for the people, of the people. Now, it is the participation of the people and their judgment that elects the government, which ultimately is the foundation stone for running any democracy very effectively and successfully. Over and above that, there are also at times allegations on the governments which get elected on 26%, 30% vote, that they don't represent in reality the will of the people. Now, if this is the situation, then if the voting is compulsory, I think everybody will have the compulsion to vote, unless there are some exceptional cases where they are permitted the freedom not to do so. And also, the political parties on the other hand today spend a lot of black money on mobilizing the voters to come to the polling booth. Now, that unnecessary expenditure, which also encourages the use of wrong money, will be curtailed. So, I think on all counts, if we consider the compulsory voting is a step in the right direction. And one need not
let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. You've argued your case fairly convincingly. Randeep Singh Surjewala, on the other hand, Shakti Singh Gohil of the Congress party has said that Congress is opposed to making voting even in local body elections compulsory. Many people say in a democracy voting is a duty and it should therefore be compulsory, and you've heard the arguments presented just now by Mr. Jay Narayan Vyas. Why do you disagree?
Well, let me, Mr. Thapa, pick up the cue from what Mr. Vyas started with. The very fundamental of democracy is personal liberty without coercion by the state or another individual or agency. When you have compulsory voting, which is punitive in nature, and I'm sure Mr. Vyas will tell us, but from what I gather is that people who will not vote will have deletion of BPL cards and some such consequences which can be fatal for the poor. These are unpardonable. After all, personal and individual liberty is supreme in any democracy. For me, nota is one such facet, and not going as an individual to vote is also another facet. And we must not forget, Mr. Thapar, that in a country like India, more so in Gujarat, where the tribal population, the scheduled caste population is very, very high, a lot of them work as daily wage laborers across Gujarat and outside Gujarat. If they are not, if they do not vote, and that leads to either punitive action against them, be their deletion of their names from electoral rolls, and much more penal consequences like denial of benefits from the state's exchequer, I think it can be fatal. So these are consequences of personal liberty that we need to look at, besides the large amount of bureaucracy.
Mr. Surjewala, let's keep our answers short because I want to keep this conversational. But both you and Mr. Vyas have sketched out fairly convincing answers about why it should be compulsory or why it shouldn't be. Let me bring in Mr. Krishnamurthy. And first, Mr. Krishnamurthy, I want to ask you, what is the Election Commission stand? Before I come to the constitutionality, I'll take that up separately. I want to ask you about the practicality of making voting compulsory in a country the size and scale of India? Is it practical?
Mr. Karan, the first point I would like to make is it's very easy to argue for and against compulsory voting. There are arguments. Only thing is you have to look at it whether the net benefit is for democracy and the people or not. Now, in a country like India, where 60 or 65% people come and vote, and more particularly in major cities like Bangalore, Bombay, people hardly 40 to 45% come and vote. Do you want a democracy where only such people exercise their vote? Are you expecting them to represent the will of the people? Either you introduce a different system of selection, or at least make people
but come back to compulsory voting.
Be that as it may, but it doesn't mean that I support compulsory voting, but it is desirable to introduce compulsory voting at least at the local levels, so that it will promote civic awareness and civic responsibilities on the voters.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt, sir? Yeah. It's not the desirability of it that I'm questioning. That in a sense let politicians argue. I'm asking whether in a country the size and scale of India it's practical. And I'll tell you why I ask that. Because one of your successors, Mr. Brahma, an election commissioner, said to the Express today that India has 83 crore voters. If 10% choose not to vote, you're talking about taking some sort of punitive action, whatever it is, a fine or jail or simply denial of BPL cards, against 8 crore people. Therefore, in terms of the size and scale, is it practical?
That's what I say. It is practical at the local government level, but certainly not practical at the state assembly level and parliament elections. There are limitations, so it cannot be introduced easily. So it cannot be introduced at least for 10 to 15 years until the voter turnout improves, because every constituency has a large voting population, and even 30% if they don't come and vote, election commission doesn't have the time and the wherewithal to go and chase these voters.
Why is it practical at the local level?
It is impossible.
Why is it practical at the local level?
Because the voting population is less, and the number of people who come to each polling station is less. It is not difficult to implement at the local level.
But the defaulting
and it will
population,
promote voter awareness and responsibility.
But surely the defaulting proportion could be the same, and therefore the proportion of people or the number of people you'll have to penalize would still be very large and daunting. Surely the practical problem remains the same.
No, it is easy to follow up action, but it is not easy to have a follow up action at the state assembly constituency level or at the parliament level.
All right, Mr. Sundaram.
There is no,
Mr. Sundaram, you're one of the country's leading lawyers. I want to raise with you the constitutionality of compulsory voting. Many people believe that it's a breach of the fundamental right of free expression, which necessarily includes the right of silence. Where do you stand on this issue?
Well, I'm one of those who believe that it is so. It is definitely a breach according to me. Let's understand one thing. There is no gainsaying the fact that having the entire population, voting population, coming out and vote is great for a democracy. At the same time, let's not also forget that a democracy which gives you under Article 19(1)(a) the freedom of speech and expression equally gives you the freedom not to speak or not to express yourself. We should also not forget that the right to vote is really a statutory right. The right to vote is not what you call a fundamental right, nor is the duty to vote imbued in the Constitution to cast it as a constitutional duty on every person. It is really something which we would want everybody to do. I, for one, will say that I would never miss an election. I would never miss my right to vote. But that does not mean that I can insist somebody else does it, because somebody else can say, look, I really do not want to go and vote. I would like to abstain. I don't even want to vote for none of the above. I don't want to go at all. Under which constitutional provision, I ask myself, can they be forced to vote? On the contrary,
can I interrupt you there?
Against 19(1)(a) of the Constitution.
Can I interrupt you there, Mr. Sundaram? You're arguing, and many people would agree with the point you're making, that it breaches the fundamental right of free expression, and therefore you can't force people to do things. On the other hand, very well-established, older, liberal constitutional democracies like Belgium, Australia, and France at the Senate level do have compulsory voting. How is it that they are not so concerned about compulsory voting breaching the right of free speech and expression or the right of silence?
There are two possibilities for this. One, it could be imposed statutorily in such a way that it does not violate any of the constitutional provisions of those countries. Secondly, it could also be put in as a mandatory constitutional duty. This is not so in India. And let us not forget one other thing. I can only remember the beautiful words of Justice Chinnappa Reddy, who was speaking for the bench, in the case where these students were penalized for not singing the national anthem as an insult to the national flag. And he said that not singing the national anthem and not speaking it out does not show insult to the national flag. The students did stand up, they did stand up and respect the flag. You cannot force them to sing the national anthem. Now, that is, I think, very, very telling. That you are asked to respect your rights, your given rights. Nobody can force you to exercise those rights in the way you feel as a citizen those rights should be exercised.
Let me stop you, Mr. Sundaram. I want to put that very good point to Mr. Vyas. What he's actually saying, Mr. Vyas, is this. All of us have a right to vote, but that also means we have a right not to exercise the right to vote. You can't force me to exercise my right. I have a right not to exercise my right. That is the conundrum that you're faced with when you make voting compulsory.
Well, Karan, let me first begin saying that I would to a great extent agree with what Mr. Krishnamurthy was saying. He is absolutely right.
Yeah, but answer my point first, sir. Sir, answer my point. Let's not go back to Mr. Krishnamurthy and practicality. Come to my point that you can't force people to exercise their right.
Slight clarification on what Mr. Krishnamurthy was saying is just I want to reinforce it. Because all the local body elections don't take place at the same time in the state. The domain is small.
I take your point. Let's not go backwards. Mr. Vyas, let's not go backwards. We're running out of time. Answer the bigger moral
coming to the constitutional issue, Karan. Coming to the constitutional issue, if the constitutional experts so feel, you know, this country has seen the times where your total fundamental rights were suspended, and the country meekly kept looking at them. You are talking about democracy where you have all rights and no duties.
Well, no, hang on a second, Mr. Vyas, that doesn't make sense.
No
one applauds the emergency. The emergency was an embarrassment. But you don't make up for the emergency.
All parties agree with it.
But Mr. Vyas, your argument doesn't make sense. Forgive me being blunt. No one applauds the emergency. But you don't make up for the emergency where fundamental rights were suspended by now making fundamental rights compulsory. I have a right not to vote. Why are you forcing me to vote?
See, you have been given that right, Karan. You have been given that right almost by nota. That I don't want to give my vote to anybody. You can deny giving vote to anybody. But then your vote is clear that you don't prefer either of the candidates.
This is ridiculous. You're saying turning up at the polling booth is now the compulsory thing. What you do there doesn't matter. You can even say, I go for nota, but I must show my face at the polling booth.
Tell me where your right to express, your right to express yourself is impeached. Number one. Number two, rules are yet not framed. Why do we believe that somebody will lose the ration card, somebody will lose the BPL card and all that?
Well, if it's compulsory, hang on a second.
By way of issuing a caution.
I take your point. If it's compulsory, the problem is there has to be some punishment for failing to vote. Otherwise, making it compulsory is meaningless. So, what that punishment is, I'll come to later. Let me stick for a moment to the constitutionality. Very quickly, Mr. Surjewala, because we're running out of time. The People's Union of Civil Liberties has made it crystal clear that they will, in fact, challenge this in court. You disagree with it equally strongly. Will you also challenge it in court? Give me a short, sharp, crisp answer.
Well, Indian National Congress as a party does not, has not made up its mind to challenge, but I am sure there are individuals as also organizations who will, and we will support such a challenge. Reason is very simple. Personal liberty and a right not to vote is inherent in our constitution, and by no statute those fundamental freedoms enshrined in Article 19 can be taken away by any state government.
All right. Let me bring you in very quickly, Mr. Krishnamurthy. you support the concept of compulsory voting at the local body level. You don't think it can be brought in at the Vidhan Sabha or Lok Sabha level for 15 years, maybe more. But you support it clearly at the local body level. Now, I put this to you. When voting is made compulsory, there has to be some punishment for those who don't vote. What's the adequate, proportionate punishment in this instance?
If your interest is only to increase people awareness and civic responsibilities, there is no need to impose penalty for a first-time offender. You can just issue a warning or censure. And if repeated offenders are there, there can be a gradual penalty, fine or otherwise. It can be disincentivizing the voter. The second point on the constitutional issue, I am afraid it has to be decided only by the judiciary ultimately. But the point is, are you entitled to put in certain reasonable restrictions or in the interest of public interest, in the interest of good quality democracy or not? The court will have to decide.
Absolutely, and whether the court believes this is a reasonable restriction or a disproportionate and unreasonable one is for the court to decide as well. But I'm coming back to this question of penalty. If you have compulsory voting, but you have no penalty for first-time offenders, and thereafter you only have a very gradual and graded penalty for second and third-time offenders, then frankly speaking, Mr. Krishnamurthy, your compulsory voting is meaningless. Because people can choose not to vote, and there's no compulsion to make them do so, and therefore this is a farce.
No, my purpose in supporting the local government election compulsory voting is only to promote civic responsibilities in a country where most of the people don't come to exercise their vote.
All right.
Do you want to enhance the quality of democracy or not? That is the point.
Whether forcing people to vote enhances the quality of democracy is a disputable question itself. Just by getting more people to the booth, but them not actually exercising a meaningful vote, doesn't improve the quality of democracy. Numbers on its own doesn't add up to quality, but leave that for another day. A very quick question to you, Mr. Sundaram, and you have to give me an answer in literally 15 seconds because we're out of time. And the question is this: can you legally make something compulsory and then have no punishment when they don't do it? Does it not become a farce?
Then how is it compulsory?
Well, absolutely.
If it's compulsory, then there must be some consequence of my not doing so. So I think this is absolutely an oxymoron.
Quite right. And therefore, if you have no compulsion, it's not compulsory, and therefore making it compulsory without compulsion makes it meaningless. Therefore, I come back to you, Mr. Vyas, just 10 seconds. If you don't have a meaningful sanction, this is a farce. But literally 10 seconds for your answer.
Well, Karan, in the first instance, I would like to say no process of reform can be overnight implemented. Number one. Number two, it's a slow process. As Mr. Krishnamurthy was saying, there is no need to sort of assume that there will be extreme restrictions on the personal liberties or the benefits that will be available.
I take your point. There won't be extreme restrictions. The danger is there may not be any restrictions at all, which is why this will become a farce. But I take your point that in fact it's not going to be a penalty, but equally it might therefore not be a compulsion either. My thanks to all four of my guests for joining me for an issue that I believe and suspect we're going to have to discuss many times, because I don't think compulsory voting is going away. It's clearly something on which our Prime Minister is personally very committed. There I end this particular episode. If you have been, thanks for watching.